Hey y'all. Good evening, everyone. You're welcome to Grief to Grace again. So, how are you doing? Yes, so today is a very beautiful day, and I'm super excited because we have a very wonderful woman of God here in the house who is ready to share her story and talk to us about all she's been through. And I tell you, like I always say, this is a different kind of grief. And this kind of grief resonates with a lot of us. So, you're welcome to another powerful episode of Grief to Grace, the podcast that helps you to move from being stuck in grief to a place of healing and grace. I'm your host, Ruth Hebzeba, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. So, our mission today at Grace to Grace is to provide a safe place for those navigating the difficult path of loss, helping them to find purpose in their pain and strength in their sorrow. And in this podcast, we share our stories. And God has given us the mandate to be able to share our stories to the world so it can be a healing platform for as many people that needs it. So today we have an incredible guest with us, like I said, and someone whose story embodies the mission of this podcast. I have Molly Susan White, and she's a woman who has experienced deep, profound loss. And as a former state of Texas representative, a pro-life leader with Operation Outcry.org, and the author of Deceived, God Brought Purpose from My Pain. So Molly knows the depth of grief, I tell you, and the power of recovery. She is here to share her story of surviving two abortions, two stillbirths, and a miscarriage, and how she found purpose in her pain. So, I urge you to stay tuned to the end of this episode so you can learn a lot from Mali. And while we're sharing all this, at the end of it all, we'll also be sharing some of our valuable nuggets from Mali's experiences. And for those of you who actively listen and stay engaged to the end of this podcast, we, as usual, will send you our special gift for waiting. So, today, I have the privilege of bringing to you Molly Susan White. Welcome to Grief to Grace. I'm really deeply grateful for your willingness to share your story with us today and also your journey through the unimaginable loss to find purpose is both heartbreaking and inspiring. I invite you to share and be comfortable as much as you can. And I am really so glad because you've been sharing. You are a pro-life speaker and a pro-life leader, and you know so much about all those things. And I know a lot of persons will learn from you, and also will be able to take us on a journey from grief to grace tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ruth. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today. And it seemed like the enemy didn't want us to be on this podcast.
Yes.
It was like, okay, where's the link? Where can I link up and join with you? And at the last minute, God pulled it together. Praise the Lord. And I'm very honored to be on here with you. And I think I share the same heart as you do, Ruth, about encouraging people who are maybe stuck in grief or they're still in the grieving process, that there is hope and healing from our loss and our
Yeah.
sorrow through Jesus Christ and through the great comforter, the Holy Spirit. And I think, by you sharing your story that you've mentioned to me a little bit earlier, and sharing my story with that reminds me, I better turn off my phone, about experiencing deep grief, and how God can heal us and grow us through that experience. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. So, are you ready to share your story today?
I'm ready to share my story. I've been doing it a long time, and what what my story is, when I was in my very early 20s, I got pregnant, and it was by a guy I was dating for quite a while, but we had already broken up, and he had already left. He'd moved out of state, and so I went to a local doctor's office to have a pregnancy test run to kind of confirm my suspicions that I was pregnant. Excuse me. And the doctor came back in the room with the test results and said, "Well, you are pregnant, but don't worry about a thing." He walks over to me and he pats me on the knee and he says, "You can have an abortion." He says, "Your life will get all back together again. It's nothing to it." And then he wrote a name and a number of an abortion clinic down on a prescription pad, and he gave it to me, and he left. And at that moment, Ruth, it was like, um, he had planted a seed in my head that I would have never ever considered otherwise. I Abortion was not part of my world. It was not part of my vocabulary. But since he was a medical doctor and he knew that I wasn't married, I thought, well, surely a doctor wouldn't tell me to do anything that would be bad. Surely, maybe maybe my baby's not even developed yet. And so I went home and I started kind of contemplating, well, a doctor said, I could have an abortion. There was nothing to it. I could avoid shaming my parents. I could, the boyfriend's already left me. I don't have anyone there to help me. And so I kind of toyed with that idea, and I ended up calling the abortion clinic. So when I called the clinic, they wanted me to, I had questions, but they wanted me to make an appointment and come in. And so that clinic was, I lived in a little town called Dime Box. I had to drive to Austin. So I made the appointment, and a friend of mine kind of drove me to my appointment. And on the way there, my heart and my mind were kind of combating. I was having a lot of conflict. Looking back, I could see now that it was my motherly instincts, my women's intuition, my conscience was bothering me, but my mind was trying to justify, well, a doctor, said it was, he suggested it. It's legal. It can't be, legal to kill a baby. And, said there was no consequences, no risks involved. And so my mind was kind of battling, both of those things. So when I got to the clinic in Austin, I thought, well, I'll ask questions, and based on the answers, then I will make up my mind whether I should do this or not. And let me take you back a little bit. When I was a little girl growing up, and I'm sure all little girls are like this if they have a healthy family, but I always wanted to be a mother, and I couldn't wait to get married and have children. I wanted 10 children. I wanted a lot of children. So I think that was kind of, part of my subconscious kind of, nagging at me. And so when I get into the clinic, I ask the lady behind the desk, uh, if there's any risks involved with the abortion procedure. She goes, "Oh, no, none whatsoever." Well, is there any, side effects? Is there any problems afterwards? No, no, no. It's just like starting your period. You'll get your life all back together again. There's nothing to it. And I said, "Well, what about fetal development?" And I said, "I'm probably 6 to 8 weeks pregnant. How far along is my baby developed?" And she took a pen. I don't have one with me, but she took a pen and put a little dot on a piece of paper. And she goes, "It's nothing but a teeny tiny clump of cells." Well, this kind of, reassured me that, okay, it's not a baby yet. There's nothing, it's not risky, but I still wasn't 100% committed. I was still torn. So I think they could see the uncertainty in my responses and my behaviors, but they hurried and rushed me back. I never went and sat in the waiting room. They took me right on back and put me in a room with other women, kind of explained what was going on, which to me, I was kind of numb. I didn't really understand anything. And they gave me a Valium, which kind of, made me groggy a little bit. And the next thing I know, I'm laying on the abortionist table, undergoing the most gruesome, painful, violating, procedure ever. You don't, they didn't put me to sleep. They didn't give me any pain medication. I mean, it was horribly painful. But what hurt the most was my own heart, because I knew right then I was doing something terribly wrong, terribly, terribly wrong. And I cried out, and they told me to be quiet because I'd scare the other girls in the waiting room. And they were just really cold and callous. I never talked to the doctor. He never asked me any questions. He never even asked who I was. And so after it was over, they put me in a recovery room. And I know there were other girls or women in there, but I never looked around and never made eye contact with anyone. And they gave you a little orange juice and gave you a little, I don't know, graham cracker or something. And after a few minutes, they escorted me out the back door into an alley. And this is an alley full of trash cans. It smelt. It was dark. It's terrible. And walking through that alley, trying to go around to the front, to the parking lot where my friend was waiting, I was just overcome with all these horrible, painful emotions. I mean, grief and regret and trauma and shock and disbelief and bleeding and cramping. And, all of this stuff was crashing down on me. And I really didn't know how to handle it. And so I just stuffed it. I stuffed it and I never thought about it. But I swore that I would never do anything like that again. Kind of fast forward a little bit, I lived very dysfunctionally after that. I continued to make poor choices. I was very angry at men. I wanted to love them and leave them like I felt like I was loved and left and abandoned. And I was just angry and hurting. And so, but deep down inside, I felt I needed to be a mother. I made a terrible mistake by having that abortion and killing my baby. I felt like if I got pregnant again, I could prove to myself that I could be a good mother. And that's very common with women who have abortions. They feel like they need to have what they call a replacement baby, maybe getting pregnant again, having this baby in hopes that it would atone for the one that they aborted. But for me too, I grew up always wanting to be a mother. So anyway, I did get pregnant again. And this time the father of the baby wanted me to have an abortion, and I refused. I thought, no, I'm not doing that. And so later in my pregnancy, it was probably about maybe 3 months in, I was very nauseous, had a lot of morning sickness. But I felt really in my spirit that I was going to have twins. And because like one day I could fit into my regular clothes, and it seemed like the next day, poof, I poofed out and I couldn't fit into anything. So we went and had an ultrasound done. I went to have an OB-GYN doctor. I told him I thought I was going to have multiples and twins, and he scheduled me an ultrasound. And during that ultrasound, I saw what a baby in the womb looks like. Head, shoulders, body, legs, arms, toes moving around, and I was blown away because I was lied to. They told me it was just a tiny little cell of tissue or a little bitty tiny mass of cells. And it's a fully formed baby. It's just very tiny. And so that was shocking to see. But the ultrasound tech confirmed that I was carrying twins. And so, oh boy, I was so excited. And let me say this, my boyfriend was not with me. He sat out in the waiting room. And then she said, oh my God, And I thought, oh my goodness, what's the matter? Are they Siamese twins? I thought maybe there was something wrong with them, that they were maybe attached or something. And she said, no, there's another one. And so now I'm finding out the news that I'm having triplets. And I was ecstatic. I was thrilled. I mean, I was in shock. I just couldn't believe it. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, God has blessed me with the one that I had aborted and given me two extra. So now I'm going to have triplets. And so now my whole focus was on, having these babies, delivering these babies, taking care of myself. And I did that. It was a very hard pregnancy. Carrying three babies is pretty difficult. I didn't have any kind of medical issues, but just getting so big. And I ended up going home so that my parents could help take care of me, because I was like pretty much on bed rest. I couldn't do much. I couldn't stand up very long. And so anyway, it got down to, they wanted me to at least make 38 weeks. I was at 38 weeks. I was at 39 weeks. I was at 40 weeks. And finally, on their, like the day before their due date, I went to the doctor and I said, you got to do something. I'm miserable here. I can't go any further. I can't walk. I can't talk. I can't drink. I can't eat. I can't, I'm miserable here. So he decided to induce me into labor the next day. Long story short, they put me to sleep, me not knowing that they knew there was trouble. And when I was coming to from the anesthesia, I could hear the nurses talking in the background. And I guess I was in recovery. And so I started fighting that anesthesia so I could, so I could talk. And so I said, well, how are my babies? And I didn't know if they could hear me. So I said, how are my babies? And I heard the nurses go, shh, 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 shh. And when they did that, it was full alert. I was really fighting to come back to full consciousness. And I'm crying, well, how are my babies? And they came to me and they said, the doctor will be with you in a minute. Well, now I'm on full alert. What do you mean? Can't you tell me what's the matter? How are my babies? And the doctor and the pediatrician come in and delivered the news to me that two of my babies were stillborn. And that was a devastating blow. It crushed me to hear those words. And I could feel the life just draining out of my body. I was laying there. I was dying. I was dying. And my OB-GYN doctor says, well, you have a beautiful baby boy crying for his mother in the nursery. And when he said that, it sort of gave me the will to live long enough to see the baby that I did deliver alive. And when I saw him, they brought him to me. It was enough to give me the will to live. But I was in such deep grief and shock and trauma, not only for losing the two babies to stillbirth, but it brought back a lot of that grief, unresolved grief and trauma from my abortion. So now I'm dealing with the joy of giving birth and having a baby son. He was so cute, to dealing with the trauma and the grief of losing two of my children that I had hoped and dreamed of for 9 months, and the unresolved grief of my abortion. So I was an extremely wounded, hurting mother trying to raise this adorable little boy. Now, don't get me wrong. I did the best I could. I loved him, tried to take care of him. But on the other hand, I ran from him, because every time I looked at this beautiful little boy, I was reminded of the two stillborn babies that I'd never get to hold, never get to love, never get to see, plus the abortion, that child that I never got to see, never got to love, never got to hold. And so I'm in this battle of the joy of motherhood to the trauma of grief. And that was very dysfunctional for many years. And after a couple of years, I I think I recovered enough to the point where, okay, I'm going to go back out and have a social life again. And I was working, and I really liked this guy that I was working with, and we had talked and quite a bit, and then he finally asked me out, and we go out, and not being in a healthy state of mind and framework, we had sex, and I get pregnant immediately. And so this time I'm severely pressured by him, who, really, the pressure was he wasn't going to support me at all. He was done with it. And then my family, who was helping me raise my son, um, they just did not want me to have this baby. And I succumbed to severe pressure to have another abortion, something I did not want to do. And when I went to, it was the same doctor's office that delivered my triplets. There was a doctor there that did abortions. I did not know that at the time, or I probably would not have stayed there. And he and one of my family members made all the arrangements for me to begin a 2-day abortion procedure right then. And uh, I was taken to an examining room, told to undress from the waist down, and the doctor came in and inserted laminera, which is like a seaweed, but it's designed to dilate your cervix, and it takes 24 hours to do so. And I was just laying there numb, but when he left out of that room, I just went berserk. I lost it. Everything that I was suppressing, I lost. And I was crying and I was hollering. And the nurse came back in. What's the matter? I said, get that doctor back in here. I don't want this abortion. I never wanted this abortion. I just buried 2 babies. I've already had an abortion. I can't go through with this. And they brought the doctor back in, and I told him the very same thing. I don't want to have an abortion. I never wanted to have this abortion. I've already, I've just buried 2 babies. I've already had an abortion. I can't do this. And that doctor told me it was too late. He said, I can't take that stuff, that I can't take that out now, or it would damage your cervix and you'd lose the baby anyway. And now I just kind of slumped in despair. I left and went home, had a miserable, painful night, miserable, emotional night. Went back the next day and told the doctor the very same thing. I don't want to have an abortion. I never wanted to have this abortion. I just buried 2 babies. I have a little boy at home. I've already had an abortion. I can't do this. Well, again, he said, well, it's too late. You got to. You're dilated, and you'll lose the baby. Well, learning what I've learned over the past 25 years, that doctor was lying to me. That doctor could have gotten me help. He could have turned from an abortionist to an OB-GYN doctor and did everything he can to help save that baby. So he lied to me. Anyway, I left the clinic after all that was done, and I was just a walking dead woman. I was dead I just had to cut off all of those memories. I had to cut off all of those feelings. I had to try to forget that whole experience. And I just coped. I just coped for many years. And it wasn't until I think it was, my little boy was probably 5 or 6 years old. I had gotten married in that time frame, and I was very depressed, because when you hold on to grief, you become very depressed and very broken down, and you can't function well. You can't make good decisions. But I was at a point of even thinking suicide, but I couldn't commit suicide because I had a beautiful baby boy at home. So I went to work. I was working for a home health care agency, and sitting there in this woman's home. She had her sister-in-law visiting, and the news was on, and there was something bad on the news that I overheard. And for me, as vulnerable as I was to depression, Anything sad or bad, I was afraid would shoot me over the edge to suicide. So I avoided anything bad or sad. So I made some kind of a comment, and her sister in law was sitting there, and her sister in law started talking about this man named Jesus. And she started witnessing about who Jesus was and what he did on the cross, and that her father was a pastor and he had died, but she was celebrating because she knew he was with the Lord that he loved. And anyway, she was just sharing her heart about Jesus. She didn't know me, I didn't know her, but I saw Jesus in her face. I saw this consuming love coming out of her face, and it wooed me. It wooed me into wanting to know who he was. And that weekend, I had told my husband. He took us to church, me and the boys. He had a son, I had a son, and that's when I heard the good news. Was offered an opportunity to repent and receive Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I did that. And in the back of my mind, when I was repenting, I couldn't say the word abortions, but I asked him to forgive me of that. And so here I was being mentored as a new Christian, thought everything was good, but still suffering from depression. And another long story short, um, I went to a pregnancy resource center fundraiser banquet. I heard a woman share her story about an abortion she had as a Christian woman, and that blew me away because I thought I was the only one that was suffering in unresolved grief and guilt and regret and remorse. And and she talked about her experience, talked about forgiveness, talked about healing, but I still couldn't connect the dots that I was wounded. I was forgiven. Hey, I should be good. But I did get involved in an abortion recovery group, which what it boils down to is it shows you who God is, how God can forgive anything, how he can heal us. But the most important part of that recovery group was grieving. We got to grieve the loss of our children. I grieved the loss of my triplets. I grieved the loss of another stillborn. And through that grieving is when I started to heal. Because if we can't grieve, then we're never going to have closure. And we're going to be stuck in the same kind of cycle, same kind of a pattern of self-destruction, really, until we allow ourselves to grieve and to go through that grieving process and be healed by that. And it took a long time. I mean, I went through a 12, 13-week Bible study, but my journey's been going on for 40 years, over 40 years. Um, you continue to heal because abortion and pregnancy loss hurts you in so many ways. I mean, even when I lost two of my triplets, I felt like a failure as a mother, that I'm not even woman enough to have 3 live babies, So anyway, I learned a lot of going through the healing process and the grieving process. Number one, uh, suppressed tears never die. If when you hold on to grief, it never dies, it never goes away. Or what I guess it's buried feelings never die. And so it's important for you to face those, even if it's scary. It was very scary for me to go back there and remember those things. I mean, I had trouble remembering a lot of stuff. Um, but the more you talk about it, the more you allow yourself to cry where you're hurting, the more healing and the more peace that comes to you. And I'm sure you've experienced that in your own journey, Ruth. I can't hear you.
Okay, I said definitely, yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a journey. It's been a journey. A lot that we've been through. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and grief is a journey. I mean, you can heal and you can go through all the stages of grief. Like I think the first stage is like, you're in denial that this has happened and that it's real. and then I think it's the denial stage. You might know all the stages of.
Yeah, the denial, the acceptance. But like I always tell people, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you're in denial, sometimes you're in acceptance. Like what I preach most times for people is let them forgive and accept the situation, because when you accept, you'll be able to pass through those processes,
Yeah,
because you will no longer be in denial. You know
right.
that yes, it actually happened.
Yeah,
You know that things happen. You know all this stuff. You'll be able to manage every stage as they come,
right.
because the truth of the matter is, you are not when you it's not like it's a relapse. We are human. Sometimes we go up, sometimes we go down. Sometimes it seems like things are working, sometimes it seems like things are not working.
Right.
So but in all things we should just believe in God and keep working and believing that everything is going to be okay. And what I preach and I tell people is accept, because that was what helped me. When I was following the stages the way everyone was following it, I realized that it doesn't work that way.
No,
I
the
realized
stages
that,
are different. Yeah, they're different for
yeah,
different
but
people.
everybody is different, and it doesn't work the way we feel it's supposed to work. But immediately I decided to go into accepting, forgiving the situation, forgiving everybody for whatever they've done, for whatever they've done wrong, for whatever they've done to me, forgiving the situation, forgiving myself for not accepting. I realized that I was able to heal properly. And that is what I preach. That's what I tell people. The first thing you need to do is to accept. And I tell you, if I had accepted the situation when my husband, I realized that he had cancer, I would have done things differently.
Mm,
But because I was in denial and I just believed that no, I'm a Christian, things like this cannot happen to a Christian. We need to keep praying, we need to keep believing in God. And I refused to accept the situation that, yeah, this is cancer. Let us accept that, yes, he may die. We may not say, okay, he will die,
mm.
but he was already in stage 4. So
Wow.
there is already a possibility that he will die.
Yeah.
So if I had accepted, I would have been able to handle most of the things properly. But I was not ready when
Yeah.
everything struck. And I was like, whoa, God, did you allow it to happen? And I almost lost my faith. I lost myself. I died at some point. And so I always believe that I was talking with someone yesterday, and we were talking about this, and we what we're talking about. He said he was in denial because of the daughter's illness, and we were talking about it, and I said, if only I had accepted. The first thing we need to do is to accept the situation, accept, and then you start praying and believing that there may be a miracle. But even if there is no miracle, prepare the person
Yeah.
so that the person wouldn't miss heaven. But when you start pushing the person and making the person believe that healing will come and healing doesn't come, the person may be discouraged and may even offend God and may not even be able to make heaven. So those are something. But I thank God for the kind of husband I had. While I was in denial, he was in acceptance. He
Oh,
accepted his fate. He believed that, oh God, you give life and you take it. And he wanted me to understand that part of salvation. And I said, no. God said, whatever we ask, we will receive.
right. Right.
It, it was two different things, but today I know better. And so
Yeah,
I,
and it's hard. It's hard to, you're standing on God's word, you're standing on faith, you're standing on believing God can heal, he can do miracles, and then try to balance out that, like your husband was saying, God gives life and he takes it. And then like in Solomon's, in the book of Solomon, that Ecclesiastes, is it that,
yeah,
the time to live or time to
yeah,
die?
yeah,
God knows our numbers and our
that's
days.
no,
He
yeah,
knows,
that's it.
but it's a hard balance, isn't it?
It's a
You
very hard balance because you cannot really balance it as a Christian most times because you believe in that God can still do a miracle.
And he says
You,
it takes the faith of a mustard seed, right? To move
yeah,
mountains. And so you feel like if you don't believe in that he can do it, then you don't have any faith. And if you have faith that he can do it and he doesn't do it, then you have to have even stronger faith, knowing that God has got a plan, and he's not doing these things to hurt us, like your husband passing. No
yeah,
children. He's not doing that to hurt us, but we can grow in that situation. We
yeah,
can
that's it.
to trust in God more and lean on
Yeah,
Him more and allow Him to grow us and to
that
use,
is it.
because He's using your story now to comfort those with the same comfort you yourself received. And He's using my story that same
That
way.
is it.
Hmm.
And I was really impressed when you told me how far you've traveled with your story. I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Because
I
people
have
need
told
to
my
hear
story
it.
all over the world, and in your story with the loss of your husband, my story with abortion and losing children is not uncommon to man. It's
No,
common everywhere, and there's hurting women and men everywhere. And if we as a society can look, deal with our own pain so that our eyes would be open to see that other people are hurting and we can minister to them and give them the gospel. Wow, Ruth, don't you know our society would be transformed?
that is it. It
It'd be
will definitely
transformed.
be transformed.
I mean, from a hurting, wounded, stuck in our grief to healing, to going through that grieving process, to healing, to growing. For me, going through the healing, dealing with the grief, having closure, having a funeral service for my children, naming my children, and going through other counseling things that I needed to do, I have become more compassionate. I've become a more compassionate human being. I'm not a hard hearted, angry woman that I used to be.
That
I,
is it.
I'm more compassionate to those who are hurting
Yeah,
and
that's
wanting to see them healed, wanting to see them set free. And you said something about forgiving ourselves, which I
yeah.
found interesting. My husband's about to come in, so I'm gonna put this on mute just for a second when he comes in. But we have to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes. God forgives us of our sin, but we need to forgive ourselves for making mistakes and hurting other people, or forgiving other people for hurting us, because it sets us free. And forgiveness doesn't mean that, you can come in, honey. I might put let's see if there's a place that I can, is there a place where I can blur my background? Uh,
Okay.
let's see, there's a virtual background, but anyway, I want my husband to be able to come in. Um, but forgiveness doesn't mean, like, say someone hurt you, like the abortionist hurt me, the father of the children hurt me. It doesn't mean it was okay for them to do that. It doesn't mean that my pain isn't valid, my offense isn't valid. It just means I'm letting them go. I'm not going to hold on to them through the act of unforgiveness. And
That's
uh,
true.
and it really frees us. I mean, you don't know how much bondage you live in until you forgive someone who's offended you, and and,
That
and,
is it.
and see how free that you can be from that.
That is it.
I'm going to stop this camera just for a second, see if I can find a blur on it so he can. Oh, he's going to go sit down. Okay. All right. Let me see. I'll turn it a little bit. Okay. So I'll give him a little bit of privacy. We're finishing here.
No, it's okay. To be done. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate your sharing because you are so transparent with everything that you talked about. And you've been able to help us find our strength and know how we can keep moving. And also you've been able to help us find God's presence, especially in transforming our grief into something more. And I'm really so grateful to you for coming over to share. And but there are some stuff that I learned from
Huh?
you today, and that is, can you imagine? There are some stuff that I learned from you today, and that is that we need to be steadfast, irrespective of what we are going through. And imagine I'm sharing Jesus Christ to everybody, because if that person doesn't share with you, you can imagine what would have happened. Maybe you would have been lost, But because of that, just that one sharing that was done, we then there was salvation. And today, you've been able to share your story all through,
Amen.
all around the world, and God is still helping. So I really want to say thank you for coming over. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
You
Oh, I kind of wanted
have
to real quick tell
okay,
people about my book. Um,
yeah,
they can find it on Amazon, and it's a real in-depth story of my pregnancy losses, either through abortion or stillbirth or miscarriage, and how they impacted my life and the life of people around me, and the healing process, plus how you can allow God to bring purpose from your pain. And I do give a lot of suggestions and information about how you can allow God to use your story for his greater purpose. And especially when it comes to abortion and pregnancy loss. But I just want to, if y'all want to go on Amazon, you can pick up my book. And I've, I've had a lot of people tell me that once they pick it up, they couldn't put it down. It's a quick read though, but it's going to take you down to the depths of pain, and it's going to bring you up to the throne room of glory, because that's where God reigns, and that's what he wants for us, is to be set free and healed and receive all of the things that he has for us, and to do all the things that he has called us and equipped us to do. So, oh, I can't hear you, Ruth. Yeah.
is that way they can reach you on Facebook, on Instagram, and everywhere.
Yep.
And because I know a lot of persons want to reach out to you, especially with your book, and also if they have other stuff they need to talk about, you know.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate you having me on today. And
Did you
yeah,
hear me? Can
mhm,
you hear me?
I can hear you. It's kind of choppy.
Okay, I said, is there a way they can reach you? Because or maybe you
Okay.
can share your link, or you can talk to them about
I
how
have
to.
yeah, I have a podcast called More to the Story with Molly White. It's on Spotify. It's on all of the social media, all of the streaming platforms. You can go to operationoutcry.org. Operationoutcry.org is a ministry of women and men who've been hurt by abortion. You can reach me through that. You can reach me on my Facebook under Molly Suzanne White, or you can reach me through Ruth. I'm sure she can kind of connect us if you want to reach out to me. But yeah, that's our Molly is for life at Gmail. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of persons have these abortion issues, and like I get a lot of messages on abortion, grief from abortion, grief from the birth of children. So I know definitely a lot of persons want to reach you. So after now, I'll get your link, and I'm going to put it down below so a lot of persons can also see it right there on the link and purchase your book, and also find a way to reach out to you. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Thank you.
Molly is a speaker. If you need her to come and speak on Pro Life, she is always available. Reach out to her if you need to talk about Pro Life, and if you have to share her story in your church, in your organization. She is always there to help you. So
Yes,
thank
amen.
you, Molly, for joining us. I'm super
Thank you.
excited
God
today.
bless
But
you.
yeah, I'm not going to leave without sharing our regular Bible verse today. And today we have Psalm 147 verse 3. And it said, I will.
So Ruth, you're very, very choppy. I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but you're very
Oh,
choppy.
really?
Can barely understand what you're saying. I mean, I'm catching pieces here and there.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but still kind of a lot of static, maybe. Okay, I can't
Is it
hear you.
better?
Say
Is it
again.
better now? Is it better?
That's a little better.
Okay.
It could be on my end, but I just wanted to make you aware of that just in case.
Yeah. Okay. So I may just have to end it. So thank you so much. Just remember that the Lord heals the brokenhearted. So no
Amen.
matter how broken you are, the Lord Jesus can heal you. Don't give up on yourself because there is so much that you can still achieve. Thank
Amen.
you so much for joining us today. And I know
Thank
I
you.
had a lot of visitors, my kids on the background today, and I because my light for some reason decided not to work today. And I said, okay, there must be a way out. I have to do it anyhow. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Ruth.
all
God
that you
bless you.
guys do.
God bless y'all.
Thank you
All
for
right.
doing it.
All right.
And
Bye-bye.
I know that we'll meet again in our podcast. Have a very